Hello everybody, Kelly Rice here, but I write under the pen name K.M. Rice, and I just realized I call myself Kelly Rice. Well, I am Kelly Rice, but Rice, and then I follow it with Rice, right? Anyway, welcome to my latest vlog episode. It is the 1st of 2017. I hope that this new year has found you all happy, healthy, and well. It certainly has for me, and I'm very excited to see what this year has in store and what it's going to bring. And I have some creative projects planned that I think you guys are really going to like, so I'll be sure to update you on those as they develop. But today, I'm going to be talking about a subject that is writing to market. Probably well over a month ago now, maybe 2 months ago, I did a post asking for my viewers to offer me some subjects that they would like me to discuss. And Flutterytum on Instagram asked, why is writing to market asking for trouble, and why is it trouble that you welcome? And I thought that was an excellent question. Thank you for prompting me with that. Now, for those of you who might not know, writing to market is writing on trend. So if you could go back about 10 years ago, was it 10 years ago, really? Yeah, it was. When Twilight was all the rage, or at least starting, you'll probably remember that everywhere you looked in the young adult section, other than Twilight, there were tons of different vampire stories. And that's because Twilight was such a huge hit, and they were, slated to make the films and all of that, that agents started buying on trend. So Twilight started the trend and became a big success, and then what agents tend to do is say, oh, okay, well, people are really into vampire stories right now, and then they buy up all the vampire properties. I've experienced this personally because I was trying to get published traditionally back then, much more aggressively than I am now. And one of the things I experienced in my queries was when I would actually start up conversations with agents, they would, especially for my young adult work, they would say, do you have anything with vampires? Because, that's what's in right now. Or, oh, I see you've got pirates in your book. That might be the next big trend, but we don't know, so let's hold off on that. So that's how the market goes for the most part, and so writing to market would be if I, perchance, saw that Twilight was a huge success, saw that everyone was buying up all the other vampire books, because part of that, I think, is because the agents see that book did so well, that property was successful, that must be what people want, and also because if you read Twilight and you're a massive fan and you can't wait for the next book to come out, maybe you'll look to another vampire story to kind of satiate you in the meantime, or maybe you've just suddenly gotten really into vampires and you're going to want other vampire books. So I understand why these trends happen. If I were to write to trend back then, I would have sat down and instead of having written a book with pirates in it, as I just mentioned, I would have said, I need to make them vampire pirates, or I need to just make them vampires. Or I would have written a whole new book about teenage sparkly vampires and try to avoid copyright infringement. So that's writing to market. Hunger Games came out, it was a smash hit, the same thing happened. All of a sudden you see dystopian fiction for young adults all over the place. Though it wasn't quite... That's a more difficult genre to mimic, I feel like, than just the vampire trope. So that was a little bit, in the Hunger Games trilogy, I would say, is a bit more nuanced and heavy. Twilight, from my understanding, I haven't read it, and I'm sorry if I'm insulting anyone, but I really would rather stick my finger down my throat and vomit than read one of the Twilight books, just because I cannot turn off that part of me that is editing nonstop. I mean, it was recommended to me because all the Harry Potter books had ended and people were like, oh, you like vampires, you'll probably really like this. And I remember it was before the huge craze had hit, way back when Borders still existed. And I remember opening up the book to a random page and reading a paragraph, and the entire paragraph was about, it needed to be one sentence. Someone wadded up a piece of paper and chucked it at Bella Swan's head. Like there, I just said it. But instead, it was a whole paragraph. So-and-so tore a piece of paper out of their notebook. They wadded it up. They looked around. They took careful aim. They threw it. Bella felt something hit the back of her head. By the time she registered what it was, she slowly turned around, and the people were laughing. Like, it just, to me, took really long to have a piece of paper thrown, and once I saw that, I'm like, okay, no. And I was still in grad school at the time, and I was like, I just can't turn off what just started grad school, actually, if it was 10 years ago. Wow, I'm old. But I can't turn off that internal editor, and so when I encounter prose that just, like, kind of, I'd just rather not deal with the stress. Now I've totally gone off on a Twilight tangent. Back to the subject. You know, these trends tend to stay in the fast-moving, fast-growing markets, which are usually young adult and middle grade. So I actually don't have a good example of what currently the trend would be. But that's okay. 'Cause I look like this. The reason I don't write to trend is because there is some magic in the creative process, and I know that you readers will know exactly what I'm talking about. When you pick up a book and you start reading it, you can feel it when the author is in love with their material. For example, my sister Alex and I have both read all of Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Cycle, which are the books about the character Eragon. Yes, the first novel is highly derivative of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, but if you keep going, you really get into the heart of Paolini's world that he did create originally. And we had the exciting pleasure of bumping into him in a lobby at Comic-Con, and my sister is just a massive fan of these books, and she was really nervous about saying hello, and she finally worked up the courage, and she said hello, and I think I had to speak for her and introduce them, and he said, well, that's what you do at a convention, you come up to people, you say hi, and so that kind of broke the ice, and he asked her what her favorite part of the books were, and she said all the scenes that take place between Eragon and his dragon Saphira. And he said, those are my favorite as well. It's no coincidence that the author's favorite and my sister, the big fan's favorite, are the same. And that's because the passion and the love came through on the page from the author to the reader. And I think that that is this incredible magic that happens with reading and writing and writing and reading. And that cannot be manufactured. That cannot be cheapened by attempting to conjure it. It has to come from the heart. It has to come from a real authentic place. We've all been there before where we've read a book, and it usually is one of these books that was written on trend, and it starts off really fun and engaging and feels fresh, and then falls into these old tropes and just feels stagnant and boring. Even though exciting things might be happening, you lose interest because you're not connecting. Your imagination isn't connecting with the imagination of the author. And I think, I don't know because I haven't ever really done this, I think that that is because that author really needed some money and had someone willing to sell their book for them and wrote to trend. And so they weren't necessarily telling a story that they were super enthused and excited about and felt the need to bring to the world. They were writing a story that they knew would sell, or that their agent told them that they could sell. And that is something that, as Fluttery Tom noticed, I've never done, and I kind of refuse to do. I refuse to do it, not because I think I'm so high and mighty and I'm doing art and everyone else is below me. I refuse to do it because I think it would actually hurt me far more than it would better my career. I have a friend named, her pen name is Marina Adair, and I know I've mentioned her before, and if you like romance novels, please look her up. She's an amazing romance novel writer, and she's been incredibly successful writing her romance novels. And so these are category romance, just to be clear. Category romance, if you don't know, are, they're kind of, I like to think of them as the romantic comedies of the literary world, because they always follow the same pattern. It's always boy meets girl, their goals are in conflict, they fight, they kind of start to like each other, then there's always a reveal that something was untruthful happened, and then they have all this doubt, and then there's a grand gesture at the end where the man reaches out, and then they get together and they live happily ever after, or whatever. I don't know. I've actually only read her first book that she gave me, which was really cute and fun, and it followed that pattern, and I know that that's the pattern that these books all follow, and their readership is very specific. The people who enjoy those stories. In fact, I'm really curious, if any of you who read category romance are also watching this vlog and have read my stuff, could you leave a comment and let me know? Because from my understanding of this audience, largely these are people who they know they're basically getting the same story, and they need it. They need the same story as a comfort and as an escape. And to me, that stuff, romantic comedies, all that, that is true fantasy. I mean, dragons and all that, that's like not happy escapism. That's danger, that's suspense, that's, of course, it's slipping away into another world, but a comforting, fantastical world to me is a romantic comedy where they're just these attractive men everywhere and they just fall over and they, you know, when you walk by and then they're always have like, when there's a misunderstanding, it's always like, no, honey, I was working in the soup kitchen that day. I wasn't cheating on you. Oh, wow. And then like the snow is falling and it's Christmas and like, I watched a lot of Hallmark this year. Anyway. Marina Adair has a wonderful established audience of people who are already looking for, well, her books because she's done so well, but also if you were to enter the category romance field, you would have, I wouldn't call it a built-in audience, but you would have a group of people ready to read your type of story, wanting to read your type of story. I have thought a lot about doing that. I mean, I look at her success, I look at how well she's done and how, you know, she's just thriving in this category, and I think, gosh, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I shouldn't be following my inspiration, maybe I shouldn't be following the stories that are I feel like I have no choice but to tell these stories, but maybe in between those, I should be writing something more marketable, because that's how I'm constantly slammed by agents and publishers is even though they say I love the style of your writing, I love the cinematic quality of your writing, I have no idea how to sell this, don't even know what category to put it in. And so then the trail towards traditional publication for me has traditionally always stopped there. But that's made me question my integrity, I suppose, as a writer, because I think, am I doing this to tell these stories, or am I doing it to make money? Well, hate to sound like not very artistic, but I really need money. So yeah, if there's a writing opportunity to make money and it's not necessarily the exact type of story that I would have told, under the right circumstances, I will take that job. But when it comes to myself and telling my own stories and telling the stories that I feel like have come to me and demanded to be told, I'm going to do that as well. Those are the books that you've read by me. That's Darkling, that's The Wild Frontier, that's all those short stories in The Country Beyond the Forest and the poems. Darkling is easily my most successful book, but those aren't bestsellers. Those aren't New York Times bestsellers. Those aren't even necessarily gaining more and more traction the longer that they've been out. But they are an integral part of me, and they were stories that had to be born when they were born. If I were to attempt to write something in the hopes of making me gobs of money, rather than from the impetus of this story needs to be in the world, I don't question why. It just came, okay? And I put it out there, and I will let the readership decide if it really did need to be in the world or not, but I'm just following this creative impulse. But if I were to shift and say, no, I just really need a chunk of change, I'm going to attempt to write category romance. And I'm using that as the example because I just talked about it. And like I said, I know someone personally who's been phenomenally successful in it. They even made a Hallmark film of one of her books, Autumn in the Vineyard, so you should check that out as well. But if I were to do that, as people have sometimes advised me, they say, you know, why can't you just write a romance? That'd be really easy for you, right? And I think, yeah, maybe I could. I tried. Okay, once my Afterworld series is out, which, don't get me wrong, there's romance in it. There's romance in all of my books. I mean, there's romance in The Wild Frontier, there's romance in Darkling, but none of them are a romance. So that's the difference. There can be a love story in a book, but it doesn't mean it's a romance. Like, it won't go onto that shelf in a bookshop, if you can find an actual bookshop these days. So yes, I have thought about, I'm so long-winded, I'm sorry. I have thought about trying my hand at that before. And when I first started writing Ophelia, which is book 1 in the Afterworld series, I kind of was going down that path, and it was okay for a little bit. It was a romance with, you know, a twist, as all my stories would have to have. And then my imagination completely rebelled and vomited onto the page, and when this book is out and you read it through the end, you'll look at me and go, what the fuck? Like, you think that's a romance? And because it is just, it goes so far from the cozy. In fact, it once you read the first paragraph, you'll understand that it's not cozy. I'm sorry, I don't write cozy. And these category romances need to be cozy. And Ophelia begins, like I said, with the opening paragraph, it's just, you're warned right away, this is not a cozy story. So even though I may have started with the intent of trying to write a romance and altering it a little bit to bring in, you know, some of the fantasy and science fiction crowd, it ultimately took on a shape and the life of its own, and I scrapped the whole romance idea. And that's when I realized my imagination so violently rebelled against trying to write a category piece of fiction because I am not a fan of it. I don't read it. I don't enjoy it. I don't seek it out. In times of grief, in times of upheaval, my sister and I, and my mom too, we will put on a Hallmark movie. We will, or like at Christmas time, we'll have one on in the background. But usually I'm only drawn to those types of stories because, like I said, that for me is fantasy and escapism. I'll be drawn to those when I am feeling unstable in my own life. And so that's why I can completely understand why people want to read these stories and why they don't care who's written it, don't care who the protagonist is, they just need that escapism. And that's cool. Like, I totally understand that and I get that. I don't personally seek that in books. So if I'm not the readership, why the heck would I expect other people to be that readership? You know what I mean? Like, if I am not... Basically, I would have no idea what I was doing. I don't fully understand what it is that the people who read category romance are looking for. What I described when I was describing category romance is kind of a paint-by-numbers method. There is a lot more to it than that. And I don't understand those nuances. So, you know, I mean, like, I read Pride and Prejudice, and I was like, are they all going to blow up at the end? Please blow up at the end. Because, like, I was so bored. But Pride and Prejudice is a classic. Pride and Prejudice is something that generations of young women and men have read and aspired to. And it's a hugely inspirational book. I mean, my God. Like, if she could be around today and know how popular her book still is, that's just incredible. Anyway, that's another tangent. But my point, I am not the reader of category romance. So how dare I try to write it and peddle my stuff to that crowd and say, eat it up. I just think that's really insulting to that readership. And I think that it's treating fiction like a machine, you know? It's like, if I just hit all these numbers and hit all these notes and throw these colors on the canvas, these idiots will eat it up. Well, no, I don't think that's true, and I don't think it works that way. So if I were to invest the time to write to market, any market, that I was not a part of, it would just fail horribly. It would be a waste of my time. It would be a waste of your time as a reader. and it just would go nowhere, and it would be a disaster. And I like to think that that's foresight that I have, that I don't have to do that and fail to have earned that knowledge. And I have heard that sentiment echoed by other authors, so I know I'm not alone in that. So that is why, again, I apologize, my long-winded way, full of tangentials, that is why I don't choose to ever try to write to market. The other part of Fluttery Tom's comment was, and why it's a bad thing that I welcome. I don't necessarily welcome the challenges that come from being ostracized. I am self-published. I am writing stories that do not fit neatly in any marketing category. I have, for Darkling, close to 200 rejection letters from agents. I used to, when I would get a rejection letter, go out for a run, and then, you know, like, I mean, I run all the time anyway, but that was my way of dealing with that stress. And then it got to the point that I was like, I just expect it. So that has made me a little bit jaded, but it does send the clear message that my story, which I thought, I've found, you know, in my own limited marketing experience, it's a thriller, it's a dark fantasy piece, it's a romance, you know, it fits in a lot of different categories rather than a category doesn't exist. And I think a lot of people are hungry for stories that don't cleanly fit into a cookie-cutter mold. And I think that's why self-publishing is really revolutionizing the literary landscape, because it's giving people access to stories that they otherwise wouldn't have ever had access to. But it does ostracize me quite a bit as an author. It means that I don't have those networks in place. I don't have those business connections. I don't really have many people at all giving me advice on how to sell my work and how to find more financial stability and success with what I'm doing. And that's the price that I have to pay. That's the price that I have to pay for telling the stories that come into me like hurricanes and come out like hurricanes and hopefully have their place somewhere in readers' hearts. And the responses that I've received from my readership have been incredible. I've been blown away by how my work has touched your guys' lives. And I hope that with everything that I produce this year in 2017, it will continue to do that, because I write because I have no choice. This is just how I was made, to tell stories. But at the same time, my secondary goal is always, always, always to entertain. My tertiary goal, if possible, is to try to earn some money off of it. But that connection between a reader and a writer in this mythical space that is between us, this imagination land, that I usually feel no ownership of, and I usually feel like I was just a conduit to creating that imaginary land, or that imaginary space that is now between us. And so I'm on one side being like, oh, hi, and you're on the other side being like, this is so cool, and I'm like, yeah, I know, isn't this stuff cool? And you're like, where? And I'm like, I don't know, it's just there, like, so, it's like the weirdest explanation of the creative process, but like I said, I don't feel ownership, I don't feel control over this creativity and the end product of the creativity. That said, I register all my stuff with the U.S. Copyright Office, and I do technically own it in that way, but when it comes to imagination, that's a space of freedom for everyone, and I just love that connection of knowing that someone has come into that place that you also intensely visited as you wrote it, and that place is now real because these two imaginations were linked through it. And that's just an incredible achievement, and I hope that we continue to have that, wildlings, because Afterworld is coming. I know you've been waiting for ages for this book series to come out. I was all set to start launching it myself when an opportunity popped up to have it looked at by one more group, and I couldn't pass that up in good conscience, so I'm taking that opportunity, and that, of course, is a lot of hurry up and wait in the publishing world, just like in the film world. So I have to let that run its course, and if I get another no, then I will likely pursue this as an independent author yet again. Yeah, if anyone watching this is an agent or a manager, and you think that I'm someone you could like pick up out of the dirt and polish up and be like, here's some sunlight, then I'd be open to that. I mean, everyone likes to look pretty. I didn't mean like literally, like, I meant like my books. In case that was confusing. So, Fluttery Tum, I hope that answers your question. Even though it wasn't really a question, I hope that that was a thorough discussion of the subject you wanted. And if anyone else would like to prompt me with a question or request a subject that I talk about, go ahead and leave it in the comments or on my social media or website. You know, I'm freaking all over the place. Like, you just Google my name and you'll be like, you'll have more Cam Rice access than you ever wanted. So, look out. But, yeah, I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope 2017 is off to an awesome start. Mine certainly is. So, without further ado, till next time, me and my my special pen that I bought at the General Post Office in Ireland that's got the opening words of the Irish Proclamation of Independence on it, we're signing off. In fact, if you've ordered any signed books from me recently, probably autographed them with this baby. You didn't think you were a rebel before, now you are. Alright, for real this time. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.